There are some members of Estates 1 and 2 who do happen to support a lot of the ideas by the Third Estate. For example, the idea of having a new legislative branch, for gaining a little bit of power, for reducing taxation for the Third Estate. And yet, the Third Estate is going to be completely shut down in terms of support that's given to them by the other two estates at large and also by the king. Now, one day during the meeting, they are, whether or not it was done purposely or done accidentally, we don't know. But the Third Estate was shut out of their regular meeting place, and they see this very much as a continued act of aggression by Estates 1, 2, and the monarchy, that things are not going to change in France. So instead, the Third Estate, a few members from the First and Second, end up meeting on the indoor tennis courts at Versailles, and they swear the tennis court oath. Tennis court oath basically states that they are refusing to disband until they have created a constitution that's going to include new rights and new limitations or protections that they want to see in the French government. Now, the individuals who have gathered here declare themselves the National Assembly, and they basically publicly state to the rest of Versailles that they are not going to disband. Now, this could actually be a very significant threat by the king. His advisors are saying, okay, look, why don't we just go along with it for right now, and hopefully things won't get out of hand and we can try and help guide the discussion and not lose too much of what we want. So the king doesn't order the army in and basically allows them to stay. The other estates are ordered to join the National Assembly by the king. And this is a significant blow against the old regime and gives support to the National Assembly that things are definitely going to change. And yet there's a lot of lack of cohesion, not only in the National Assembly itself, but across from France. So here's where we come into the storming of the Bastille and the great fear in the countryside. As the National Assembly begins to try and hammer out what is going to be the Constitution of France, there's actually a major famine that's going on throughout the entirety of France. A number of the urban laborers in Paris are very encouraged by what they hear of what the National Assembly is going to do, because they feel that's going to give them more individual rights, and hopefully they'll have a government that's better able to suit their own needs and to deal with their problems. Now, there are rumors floating around that the king is not actually going to really encourage this, that he's going to be calling in the army, not just to put down the National Assembly, but also to put order in the rest of the countryside. In the rest of the countryside, the French countryside, away from Paris, away from Versailles, there are rumors that the landed gentry, that the aristocracy who's not at Versailles, are going to be raising armies against the peasants. And so this is what's known as the Great Fear. The Great Fear is also sort of connected along with the storming of the Bastille. The women of Paris, the people of Paris, want bread. They want to be able to eat. Prices have risen enormously over the past few years. And they're very much afraid the National Assembly is going to be shut down. And so a number of the Parisians began gathering at the Bastille. The Bastille used to be a castle in France, and now it's basically a prison of the king. So it's a symbol of the old regime. And the Parisians basically began hammering at the gates, trying to get in, trying to take control of the Bastille and take control of the armament so they can defend themselves. Now, the soldiers begin firing on the crowd, which of course is only going to incite the crowd even further. Some of the soldiers stop because these are their families they're firing at. Paris is allowed to storm the Bastille and take control. In the Great Fear, you have a number of peasants who are basically ransacking monasteries, ransacking estates, and causing general chaos out of fear that the army is soon going to be called down on them. Now, in the midst of all this chaos, it's basically an indication to the National Assembly that they have really got to get this constitution going in order to try and sustain order. And they're very much struggling to cope with so many of the issues of state. Louis XVI is finally forced to sign the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen and to abolish privilege of all three estates. So the privileges of taxation, of power, of wealth, they've now all been abolished. These changes explicitly overturn much of the foundation for the old regime, and there are quite a few echoes to the Declaration of Independence. Now, the rebellion by opponents of the revolution, again, because there are so many different factions, are what's going to push the revolution into the radical stage. Nobles want to restore their privilege. Peasants, although they certainly favor the idea of not being taxed as much, they're also against a lot of changes in the Catholic Church because of their very strong Catholic faith. And although the church is definitely one of the wealthiest institutions in France, and it's a wealth that's really not shared by the peasants or shared by the rest of France, the peasants see this as an attack on the church. So even though they were supporting the revolution a few months ago, now they're actually also turning against the revolution. And then you have the sans-culottes, or those without trousers. This is going to be the working class of France. And they see the bourgeois, or the middle class, as too wealthy to really consider their needs. So really, unlike the American colonies, where there was really a lot less social, economic class stratification, this classes and these very different relationships in France make it very difficult for the revolution to have any strong cohesion or to go along one straight line. And so we see the pendulum switching back and forth, depending on who gains power. Now, this is creating a great deal of fear within the first two estates, and so the royal family, there are a number of nobles who were able to flee France early on and go to Austria and join with the Habsburg family, Marie Antoinette's family. So the royal family is really looking to flee France, go to Austria, get the support of the Habsburg family, and hopefully be able to end the revolution and put themselves back in power. Now, when the family tries to escape France, when they are found, when they are brought back, they've basically eliminated any remaining support that they might have had in the country by the leaders of the revolution. They're going to be put on trial and executed. And basically, this betrayal of the king creates a further awareness of the National Assembly that France is in danger, the revolution is in danger. France is going to have to defend itself against all these external enemies if it wants its revolution to succeed. So war is declared against Austria and Prussia, again, where those nobles have fled and where they're trying to drum up support. So it's a revolution in France is definitely a distinct threat to them. It's also a distinct threat to other European nations, not just because, here was a daughter, a sister-in-law who was murdered, their nieces and nephews who have been put into prison. There's also a fear of, what if a revolution happens in our country? Because our principles, our government, are based on the same principles as France, of the old regime. If a revolution can occur there and tear down everything they know, what's stopping it from occurring in Spain, in Austria, in Hungary, in Prussia? And so there's a really strong initiative to clamp down on the French Revolution to prevent it happening in their own nation.